Hello, Tom. It's so good to see you back, my friend.
Good to see you too. I'm really happy to be back and super excited about this. We got a lot of
Yeah.
new stuff going on.
All right. So, where do you want to begin?
Well, how about we get right down to it and talk about soil biology.
All right.
I have a bunch of results I'd like to share with everyone. Well, I say a bunch of results, three or four, and basically, I sent in anticipation for this podcast. I sent some soil samples and compost samples to Andy Marsh from what is it, Rhizo LCC?
Rhizo Scott Sciences, I believe.
Yeah. So basically, she got them Friday night, and she rushed to get them done for today. And I just got them in my email, shared them with Ken. So I just gambled it, and we'll see how I'm doing.
I love Andy. She's such a friggin' go-getter, gladiator. I mean, she'll do whatever she can to help, with clients and their needs. So I'm not surprised that she made that commitment and jump through the hoops to get you that stuff. So that's fantastic. But before we start looking at results, what are these from? Let's explain to the audience. Is this the new grow or the old grow?
So these are from my beds, my Horizonal beds. So what I did is I inoculated with fish brew when I built the beds at first, and then didn't add anything, right? So about 4 months in, which is a year ago, I tested my soil with Andy Marsh, and I'm going to share the results today of last year, and then we can compare this year's results also. And I haven't inoculated anything since. So I can't wait to see what doing nothing except just straight up no-till does. But I can tell you from observations that I'm doing the bottomless pots, right? So the day after I harvest, I plant another crop, and what I do is I put my bottomless pot right next to the previous pot. And sometimes the previous pot is kind of in the way of how I want to set up my plants. So once in a while, I'll take out a pot to make some space, and I have to use a little saw to get it out of there because it's so well rooted in. There's no way I'm just pulling it out, or I'm just completely breaking the pot. And I'm noticing that let it go 7 days and I can rip out that pot, no problem. So we'll see what the results say, but there has to be some life in there. I can't imagine.
All right. So just to be clear, you're saying that if you let it go 7 days, you can rip it out. But if you let it go beyond that, then you have to use a saw to cut it free?
No, the opposite. Like the next day after harvest, the plant was so well rooted that there's no way I can pull that pot off the top of the soil.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? It's just like now it's just a little bottomless pot on top of the bed that had the plant, and I just cut that plant out the previous day, right? So
the plant you harvested?
Yeah, so I just harvested the plant, let's say, and then the next day after harvest, I'm putting in some new plants, right?
But the pot that you're cutting off was the old plant.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. All right.
Yeah. So if I want to get that off the bed, I have to use like a little saw and saw off the roots because it's very well
what's left of the pot that's still on the surface. So
exactly.
You can get it out of the way to put the new pots in.
Yeah, and usually I don't do that, okay, because I just put my new pot with my new plant just right beside it, and that's it, right?
Yep.
But sometimes, since I do a high plant count, I like to do on a 4x4. I like to do 16 plants. Sometimes the old pot that I harvested the day before,
yep.
I have to cut it out just to have a good pattern of plants, right? The way I want it, long story short.
Yeah,
So if I do
spacing.
that,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
space.
So once there's a pot here and there that I have to rip out, I have to use a little saw to kind of cut out the roots and take it out. But if I just go a week later, so say I'm a week into the next crop, then those old pots just rip out super easy. So we'll see what the results say, but there has to be biology in there because it decomposes super fast.
Yeah, you've got.
And the other results I'd like to share with everyone, and this is another big gamble, is my compost. So since I started working with the Horizonal beds, I started getting serious about composting, and I've composted every single thing that came out of my facility for the last year. And this is from the first compost that I've made. So basically, I'm on my third compost right now. I'm using, I think it's 2-yard tote bags. So once I have a 2-yard tote bag full, well, I start a new compost. So that's why I'm just at, let's say, 3 composts in. And to be honest with you, I know I'm a little over a year into this. I haven't used the compost yet. And just the reason being is that any new thing that I implement, I seriously test. Okay. So I've been using some extracts in some potted plants, for example. I wanted to do some biology tests. I just wanted to make really, really sure that everything was right before I introduce it into my bed. And if Andy is happy with my results and I have no pathogens or anything like that, nothing's way off, well, I'm going to start using them. Nice. I'm going to start using that compost.
So before we get into that, are you amending the beds with any kind of mineral powders, rock dust, or anything else in between grows?
Yes, for sure. So after every grow, I do a Logan Lab saturated and Malic 3 standard test. And based off of that, I do re-amend with powders. Yeah.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. So now, and after every crop, like, to be honest with you, my plants take up quite a bit.
Oh, I know.
So correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I'm misinterpreting this because I'm learning a lot, but I think it's either on the Malic 3 or the saturated paste. There's a soluble salts result. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I see that result is kind of like, how much amendments do you have in your soil right now? Do you have enough or not enough? It's kind of like if you were mixing a soil and you're like, oh, I'm putting 6 bags of amendments, let's say. Well, that number kind of in my head is how much did I amend that soil? So I could go in a grow. I could go from, I think the last time I went from 1500 ppms, it was quite hot, down to below 700 at the end of the grow.
And that was in soluble salts?
Yeah. Isn't that a lot?
That's actually very excellent. So let's talk about the test. All right. So for the audience, saturated paste is essentially what is available. Like what can the plant uptake? So that's basically what's being held on cation exchange sites, compost or clay or silt. So it's basically what's there. What can the plant root shoot out as the next day for a bacteria to mine that to bring it back to it. So it's really like, what do you have in your checking account? Now the
what's in solution, right? Like it's
what's
water in it. Like what is in that water now?
Exactly. It's a little bit more complicated than just what's in water, but what's available, what you have in your checking account that you can write checks for, for nutrient terms.
So is the soluble salts that result, is it in the saturated paste?
Yes, but I think they also have soluble salts in the malic 3 as well.
Oh,
But
okay.
it's less important in what the malic 3 shows, because again, malic 3 is your savings account. That means everything that's accumulated in your soil. So
Hmm.
that could be like phosphorus and calcium can be through the friggin' roof, but they're not available. They're bound up in a rock form or a mineral form that needs to be degraded and mined by the bacteria so that then it does move into the checking account. So then the
Yeah.
plants can access it.
Yeah.
So that being said, let's Ken, go ahead and let's pull up the Logan Labs saturated paste, and or we'll start with the chemistry, then we'll bounce to the saturated paste.
Okay, I haven't sent the saturated paste, and I could send those. Want
Yeah,
to check out the biology
yeah,
first? He's got
yeah.
it, and then I can share my Logan Lab results.
All right, so you go ahead and start sending that stuff over, and yes, Ken, perfectly blow that shit up so we can see what it looks like.
Okay,
All
I'm
right,
gonna send that to you right now,
all right.
Ken.
So we're looking at 5/8/23 and 4/19/24.
And
So
this
this,
is the soil.
yep, yep. This is Andy's report. So basically, it's a biological report. So the first thing that we look at is bacterial biomass. Originally, it was pretty high, and now it's leveling out. That's awesome. More mature soils are going to have a lot less bacteria than immature soils. That's just the way nature works. Um, Bacterial standard deviation low, which is good. Actinobacteria, which again, the actinobacteria have gotten a bad rap. Um, they are viewed as parts of the decomposition process. In other words, composting. So actinobacteria act in a low oxygen environment, but pretty much what they're doing is supporting decomposition, but they eventually become food as that compost matures. So again, they've got a bad name. I personally like to see numbers like this that show that there is some diversity there for the bacteria to or the nematodes or the protozoa to consume them. So that looks well in range. The deviation is high, so that means the higher the deviation, the more you have to take it with a grain of salt because
And
um,
just to make sure, I was looking at something else there. You did notice that there's two results, like there's the last year results and
yeah,
there's the
yeah, yeah. That's
okay,
what I'm
cool.
doing. I'm comparing.
All right.
I'm comparing last year's to this year and
Okay,
showing
okay,
that your soil is moving in a more matured way, or it's
okay. Sorry,
maturing.
I was sending out Logan
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
results.
No,
Ken.
no problem, dude. I'm here to help you. So yeah, you just keep asking questions. If I go too quick or I bounce over something, hit me up.
Okay, I'm
Um,
paying attention now.
all right. Now that we got our thinking caps on. So back to an explanation of why it's important to understand standard deviation, because basically the higher the standard deviation means the more diluted she has to make it. So therefore, the less depth, and by depth I mean accuracy that test has. Again, these are still very valuable tests, regardless of whether it's low, medium, or high. It's just you have to take it with a little bit more of a grain of salt. So again, I'm happy to see actinobacteria in a developing soil. Again, that's showing diversity, which I consider to be very valuable. So next we move down to fungal biomass. You were at 251, and look at your fucking numbers now, bro. What the fuck, dude? That's what I'm talking about. All right,
That's
in
what
one
doing
year,
nothing is all about.
yeah, in one year, you quadrupled your biomass, and that's fantastic. Again, what fungus does is the saprophytic fungi provide nutrient to the soil food web. So they are not only mining material out of the organic matter, some of which is oozing out in cytoplasm, especially when it gets disturbed. That cytoplasm is essentially like amniotic fluid. It's providing nutrients for other organisms to absorb and also divide and expand. So it's really good to see, high levels of the saprophytic fungi. because again, it's showing diversity and it's also feeding the overall soil food web communities. So fungal standard deviation, it was high originally, it's moderate now. So again, that is a really good indication that as you get down or lower deviations, that you're more accurate in your information. So that's like another star on top of your forehead for that one.
Nice.
Then you go down to F to B ratio. Now, F to B ratio has always been a kind of a sticking point in my mind. It is a very, very valuable tool in understanding undisturbed soils. And I use the word purposely, undisturbed. So in nature, in nature, you would see in an undisturbed soil system 10,000 to 1 fungi to bacteria in an old growth forest, even higher, 100,000 to 1. But as soon as you get into disturbed soils, you have changed the value of that comparison, the F to B ratio. Because, yeah, if you just let this plot or this bed just go forever, that number is just going to continue to rise and rise and rise, which is good. But when you're dealing with a disturbed soil, in other words, this is only a year old, to get those kinds of levels is fantastic. But without truly understanding the mycorrhizae side of this, um, and understanding the nutrient cycling side of it, it's not the whole picture. And I guess that's what I'm trying to say is that it's a valuable piece of information, but it ain't the whole picture. It's important to understand, but not to hang your hat on that. Okay, but again, really good. And of course, you're tripled again or quadrupled your F to B ratio, which is again moving everything in the right direction.
Awesome.
Protozoa. Let's see this again. Very, very nice increase. Again, look at the high deviation in last year's soil and the moderate deviation in this year's soil. Again, showing more accuracy, more depth, more value to that figure. Flagellates. So your flagellates are thriving. Your amoeba are going down. This has always been a real issue in trying to understand soil succession. So when I first started working down at U of A, I really was interested in understanding desert soil. And the reason why is because when it rained the next day, when the monsoon hit, the very next day, everything was green. Like I would drive down to Tucson on a Friday. Friday night would have a monsoon. Saturday midday, I'd be driving back up to see my daughter at U of A, and the desert was green, and it literally was overnight that it went from brown to green. So I was like, "There's got to be something to this." So I took some soil, smuggled it onto a plane, almost got a freaking full proctology exam for smuggling dirt. Was able to get it back to Connecticut, and when I microscoped it, what I noticed was a lot of flagellates. And to me, that didn't make sense because flagellates typically tend to be in more aqueous soils, and amoebas tend to be in more drier soils. Um, but what it indicated to me was that, well, that kind of makes sense that when the rains come, the flagellates come out. And when the soil begins to dry down, the flagellates go back and cyst and the amoebas come out. So my tendency would be to think that based on the difference between the flagellates and the amoeba means that your soil is a little bit more moist now than it was the time you tested last year.
Okay.
All
That
right.
could very well be
Because,
possible. Yes.
yeah, because those ratios have shifted a little bit. It used
Hmm.
to be higher in amoeba, now it's lower in amoeba. So
Yeah.
again, the fact that you have that level of organisms is off the charts, man. You've got to be at close to uh, 250 pounds of nitrogen available over the next 90 days. That's free nitrogen. That's nitrogen pulled out of air or in organic form. So
Okay.
really high level of supporting for the plant, which is again fantastic. Um, Bacterial nematodes. Look at that number. That went up as well. So now you've almost doubled what you had last year. And the fact that you didn't go down and the bacteria did shows that this soil is maturing. It's getting better and better and better. And it will continue to do so because obviously you're being a steward of the soil. You're making sure that all the minerals that are required for that plant are present, and
Hmm.
understanding that chemistry is the only limiting factor to biology. So if you do not have the chemistry in balance, that is going to affect the biology. And you
Yeah.
obviously your biology is getting better and better, so you are balancing chemistry like a champ. So again,
Awesome.
yeah, fantastic. This is a wonderful report, my friend.
Awesome. I've been having no issues. Like it's so easy growing in those beds that it's kind of like I told you before. I saw this is I'd be surprised that it's not good. You know, everything's just working out. And that's something I wanted to mention too is in this room, in my Horizonal room, I just pretty much did everything you told me to do. And everything just works out. And that is very rare in the world of cannabis when you're taking advice from people. You're trying to learn things on the internet, you're trying to read books, people tell you you should do this, do that. And in my experience, I've been growing for maybe 13, 14 years. It just sort of never really happens like you want it to happen, but these horizontal beds just deliver. Like the way that the whole watering, the way that the water moves through the soil, the ease of watering, plant health, just everything just works like you said it would. So thank you.
hey, hey, I'm only following nature, man. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm just explaining how it works.
Yeah, still.
But again, on that note, I think that the key to this whole system is the fact that you have sand, silt, and clay. It's not
Yep,
just
true
organic,
that.
and
Yep.
to give the biology, again, a true living soil has to have soil, has to have sand, silt, and clay. It cannot be just organic matter. And so by providing those, valuable components, and the biology that does the work on it, again, if you have specific bacteria that mine nutrients from clay and you don't have any clay present, well, guess what? They ain't working for you because you
Right.
ain't got it. So again, that's why this system works so well, is that you are providing all of the key components that are required to naturally grow healthy plants. So,
Yeah.
again, it's
And
it's
now I'm going to start introducing the compost side of things too. So I
okay.
think, just things
Yeah.
just somehow get even better from here, you know.
All right. So let's scroll that up. Ken, is this the old one?
I think
This is
so.
the
Yeah.
same one that you were just working on, Leighton. You were at
Okay.
amoeba and flagellates.
Yep. All right. So then you just flashed a compost test up.
Yeah. So we can
The
check
new
out
one
my
that he sent me,
chemistry.
right?
Yes.
Just go back to this one, Leighton. Come on,
Well,
come on.
we're I
I
think we're
think we're
essentially,
done.
yeah, I think we're essentially done, Ken.
Do we have the biology report for the compost? Yeah, we do.
All
Yeah.
right.
Okay,
Maybe
so
let's.
let's see. This is
Oh,
this
here
is
it
with
is.
no inoculation, no nothing. Let's see what happens.
All right. What was the date? 4/19/24. So this year, nothing to compare to. How old is this compost?
A year and 4 months that I
Okay.
started it.
All right. So look at the bacterial numbers. Still pretty high. All right. That's okay. I mean, it's a working system. Your octino is consistent with what your bed was. Um, Fungal biomass, which is fantastic. I mean, look at you're at 109, and notice the values on the left. are for biocomplete compost. So you're entering the realm of biocomplete as far as your fungal biomass is concerned.
So bacterial biomass would need to be at least 135, and I'm at 3,700.
Yes, correct. And it's
It
again,
seems awfully high. Is it too high?
well, this is a great question, because typically speaking, that number will be less in a what we call not mature, not complete. When compost is finished, and a finished compost, you would tend to see numbers lower than that. Now,
Okay.
that being said, what are you composting? You're composting cannabis, right?
What am I composting with?
Yeah. What do you compost?
It's just cannabis waste,
Okay.
plant matter,
Yep.
and wood chips.
All
That's
right.
it.
So the cannabis waste is going to have a tremendous amount of nutrient in it,
Mhm.
because that's what that plant does. You said it yourself. You have to amend every year because those plants just strip. They mine that soil.
Yeah.
So
I was going to say, I actually did a compost test with my soil from my beds, and compared it to the compost test that I did with Logan on my actual compost. There's a lot more nutrients in the compost than in my actual soil.
Yeah, because that's the plants uptaking.
Yeah.
Right. So you're composting a high value, high nutritionally rich plant. So therefore, if you have, remember I said the only limiting factor to bacteria is chemistry or biology. So if you have high chemistry value, if you have high nutrient value, you're going to have more bacteria because
Okay.
you're feeding them. All right. Which isn't a bad thing. Think about prey predator, right? If you have tons of deer, you're going to attract the bears, the wolves, and the friggin' cougars, right? And so that's a good thing, because you want that level of cycling. You want those herds to get thinned. You want the cats and the wolves to grow, because that's part of nature's maturing. So eventually you get super predators. So bounce all the way down to bacterial feeding nematodes. Look at that, 1440, right? So they're pulling out, they're eating those bacteria as fast as they can, and they're growing and they're dividing because there's so much bacterial food. Look at your fucking amoeba numbers, dude. It's fucking a million. You're out of control. All right. So again,
that's good.
Yeah, because you're providing so much bacteria that those amoebas and flagellates are dividing and dividing and dividing because there's so much food present. So you're getting rapid decomposition with high levels of nutrient cycling, protozoa and nematodes, which is the whole key to everything. So this shit's rocket fuel, dude. It's absolute rocket fuel. Ready to go.
Okay. Cool.
And you can make,
like I said, I did this on a gamble. I was like, I'm just going to show everyone what I've done. Like, I had no idea. It's the first time I see these numbers. I'm so relieved that you're happy with them.
Oh, they're outstanding. You can use this as a compost inoculant. You could use this in
amazing, because you're so rough on compost. You know, you bash compost a lot.
Well, unfortunately, I get told all the time, I make the best compost. You got to see my compost. I know what I've been doing. I've been making compost forever. And then you put it under the microscope, and there's no biology. And it's like, yeah, you made great compost. It's great nutrition. It's a fertilizer. But again, we don't want just fertilizer. We want biology to offset the friggin' chemistry that's present in the soil. So again, you've knocked it out of the park, my friend.
So Leighton Morrison is happy with my compost.
I am extremely
that is big.
3 gold stars, bro. 3.
Awesome. Phew.
All right.
Now this is the chemistry from that same compost.
Yep. All right. So Ken, can you blow that up a little bit?
So I'm really conscious of my uh, carbon to nitrogen ratio, especially when I begin the compost. So I make sure that I have enough dry stems and wood chips to match the fresh green stuff that I put in it. So I'm hoping that you're going to be happy with the ratio on this test here. Let's see.
All right. So um, when you're composting, what is the temperature you're maintaining at? Because this is really important.
So I flip at 115, 120.
Perfect. And you just keep flipping it till it cools, right?
Yeah, yeah. So that's probably why you're seeing those numbers. I never cooked it to buck 50 there.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly why you saw the biological numbers you did was because you were absolutely 100% responsible with your compost. And again, if you hit 120, you start to lose diversity. If you hit 131, you've wiped out everything except for the thermophytes. And they'll come back, but it's a process. It's not a easy, quick way to transition compost to the levels that you are.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. Like depending when you begin your compost, like you're probably going there on the weekend and stuff, to flip it. So I was going there on the weekend, Saturday morning, coming to check, like, ooh, I'm at 120. Okay, I have to flip it. Let's go. So
Yep. Again, you're taking care of your kitty or your dog, your pet.
Yep.
Right? You're taking care of it. And they gave you wonderful results as a showing you that they appreciated being taken care of at that level.
Yeah. Awesome.
So what these tests, let's start with dry and wet basis, and then pounds per ton. So basically, pounds per ton equate to, if you had 1 ton of this compost, how many pounds of any one of these nutrients would you have in that 1 ton? So imagine like a super sack, 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot. Let's call that a ton. So in that ton, let's just hit phosphorus, or let's hit nitrogen. You got 477 pounds of nitrogen in 1 ton. Dude, that's off the fucking charts.
That's a lot, yeah.
Dude, 400, if you use 400 pounds of nitrogen on an acre of land, you would kill everything. You'd cook it.
Okay, so I got to watch out for how much of this compost I apply.
Or understanding that you don't want to put it like in direct contact with the root balls under the circumstances, because you are at such a high level of nutrient. Now, being said, this is not a salt-based nutrient. So you have less fear of plant burning, but you have a fear of what's called imbalance in chemistry, right? You know what nutrient lock is, right? Nutrient lock is your worst nightmare, because all of a sudden certain nutrients are bound up and others are available, and that throws the plant into a tizzy, because now it's got to try to figure out how to get out of the lock that's in. So that's the only thing that this could cause, as far as a problem is concerned, is an imbalance that caused another nutrient to lock up. So again, low and slow with this product, because obviously it's very powerful.
Yeah.
So then wet waste to dry waste. Obviously, when you dry something down, when it's in a wet form, it's going to be more diluted than it would be in a dry form. All right. So that's why you see those numbers are skewed to some degree. They don't always make sense. And that's why I don't generally focus on those. Yes, I look at the numbers. They're important to understand. I generally just use dry basis and pounds per ton to understand how valuable this compost actually is.
When you're looking at my moisture level, am I pretty target where you want to see it? That's something I was wondering. Am I wet enough? Am I dry enough?
So in my experience, Tom, the ideal sweet spot for compost, for biological regeneration, in other words, expansion, getting better and better and better, is 70% moisture and 85 to 105 degree temperature.
Okay.
So look at your
So
moisture.
I'm at 70.
You're perfect.
Bang on. Okay, sweet. Because what you told me was, I think the trick is you put it in your hand and you want to feel like you're just before the point of water coming out, but it's not. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Is
so
that
you're squeezing it as hard as you can.
Yeah, yeah.
You see just a little bit of moisture coming
Yeah.
out. Even a drop. When you start to see almost a drop forming, you're right around 70. If you just see a little bit of moisture,
somehow I eyed it out, and I'm just like bang on.
all right, you're not
I'll
giving.
be honest, that was just lucky.
No, you're not giving yourself enough credit, dude. You've been a very observant student. Every time that you've contacted me or consulted with me, you're taking fucking notes. You're listening to what I'm saying. So you're what we consider a star or pleasure student, because
Jeez,
look at your results. Yeah, look at your results. So give yourself a big hug and a pat in the back. You're killing it.
Thank you.
All right, so let's look at some of the more important, like potassium, calcium, and magnesium. And if we take the approach of understanding the saturated pace, which is the comparison of calcium to magnesium to potassium, we want to see calcium at about 75%. We want to see magnesium at about 17%, and we want to see potassium about 8%. So based on those ratios, you are calcium 39, potassium 17, and magnesium 4. So you're a little low on mag, which doesn't surprise me, because during flower, your plants are stripping friggin' magnesium. So I think that, again, this value is still really solid. You've got wonderful levels of potassium. You have nice levels of calcium. So you're not out of range. You're not out of control by any means. But that being said, when you're using this compost, understand that you're still going to have to amend each harvest, and understanding that you're going to offset that amendment by this. In other words, you need to use a little bit less calcium, a little bit more magnesium, and a lot less potassium when you're doing your flip, especially if you're putting a lot of this compost in there. If you're just doing a little top dressed here and there, then stick to the chemistry regiment that you're already doing. But if you're going to use this compost in conjunction with your minerals, then that's an important thing to take into consideration.
Yeah.
All right.
Like my ultimate goal would be to amend the least possible and use compost as much as possible. Do you think, that's sort of the goal that makes sense? Yeah.
Yeah. No,
so I want to be using this definitely as sort of an mineral amendment. That's,
So when you're after harvest, do you see a decrease in the height of soil in your beds? Do you have to build the soil back?
What do you mean by that, sir?
So in other words,
do I see my soil going down?
Yeah.
I've tried to observe that. Not really, maybe a half inch. Like I'm really not sure, but not much.
All right. So what's probably happening is the root balls are supporting the overall biomass of the material itself. And I'm not talking about biology. I'm talking about the organic matter that's present in there.
Right.
So we have a term called freeboard. So if you have a raised bed, the freeboard is the distance between the top of the bed and the height of the soil. So you should try to maintain the same freeboard. In other words, put a black magic marker on there, periodically check it. And if you start to drop down, then you want to add this compost back to that line on the freeboard. All right. Because you want to maintain those depths. That's really important.
Interesting. Because I definitely thought about that could happen since I wasn't adding any compost yet, So that's another reason to really maintain that organic matter that I want to be adding compost.
Yeah, you want to maintain that over-horizon to the best of your ability. But understand that those root balls, when they break down, they become organic matter. So they're constantly re-amending your over-horizon. But
Of
again,
course,
there's still going to be some of that.
cutting down those big plants every harvest, like I'm pulling out organic matter, right? No matter what. So I have to reintroduce it as much as I can. And just so people know also, is this I'm growing in pots in my other flower room, and that flower room contributed to my compost. So I have I've said I have 3 2-yard, I think, tote bags that didn't come out of just one room, right? So it came out of 2 rooms. So I kind of have double the compost right now because of that.
You have double the compost because you're pulling it from both rooms.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So you can also use this compost in your starts too. It's highly valuable, right?
Okay.
Because this is light and fluffy. You're putting your little bottomless pot right on top of the over-horizon, so it only makes sense that it should be mostly over-horizon. Like, you don't need any.
So are you saying that I could plant a clone directly in this stuff?
Yep. I would tweak that relationship between calcium should be higher, potassium should be less, magnesium should be higher. Mag again. So I would take my minerals and I would apply them to the best of my ability, like do an experiment like you're really good at doing, and then send that off to the Logan Ladd's compost test and see how close you got to those relationships.
Okay, because I thought this would have been too hot to put a clone in it. It's not?
No, I don't believe it's hot. I believe the clone will do pretty well. If you get those ratios right.
Cool. Now, Casey Bean wanted to point out, Leighton, when you were looking at the total nitrogen, that value is actually the 17.14. It's lost by IGN is the 477.
Wait, what? No, the 477 is pounds per ton.
Okay, well, looking across the scale to the left, it says lost by IGN, organic M plus, and the total nitrogen is below that at 17.14. So I'm not sure if that 477 doesn't say that it's the total nitrogen, or is that saying that it's the just the percentage of 17.4? I'm not sure how to read it.
Yeah, again, you guys, look, these tests are not end all be all. So total nitrogen available is 17.14. Sure, I'll buy that. Is the organic matter, is nitrogen in an organic matter state that is it's non-volatile, you can't gas it off, is 477. So it still has value. There's still nitrogen there.
So the loss by IGN is still nitrogen. They're talking about nitrogen.
Lost by ignition, burned off, volatilized, turned into gas.
Okay.
Okay. So when you ignite it, when you burn it, you're going to lose 407. But we're not burning shit in your garden, right? We're not burning.
Okay.
Right. So again,
So you didn't make a mistake.
Say again?
So you didn't make a mistake. You did not make a mistake. I think this person was saying maybe you.
Yeah, it's not always obvious, but there's a huge difference between organic nitrogen in a organic state and nitrogen that's in a more volatile state. So when you burn it, you volatilize it, you turn it into gas. And if you take the time to really look into the nitrogen cycle, it's pretty complex. It's kind of like the water cycle, a carbon cycle, any of these things. So as long as you understand that, yeah, when you burn it, you've blown this off, or the value is this, not that, that's fine. But the total N that's available in like a saturated paste test is 17.
Okay,
Still,
so let me ask you this. Let's say when I began my compost and I was mixing wood chips and dry stems and fresh leaves, if I sort of miscalculated my uh my nitrogen to my carbon to
yep. See
nitrogen
that?
ratio, and I put way too much nitrogen, would I have gassed off a lot of nitrogen and that number would have been lower?
So the only way you can gas off nitrogen or volatilize it is through heat.
Okay, because I was under the impression that, like, let's say you tried to compost just leaves, just
Yep.
fresh leaves, then that nitrogen would turn into gas and you would lose that nitrogen. No?
Well, only through heat. If you kept that pile, you could
Oh,
take pure greens. You could
okay,
take pure
okay.
and you flipped it and watered it and flipped it and watered it and flipped it and watered it. Never let it get above 115 degrees. You're not losing the nitrogen. It's not volatile.
Whoa, okay. Big time. That's a big thing you're teaching me now.
Well,
I didn't know that.
yeah. So, I mean, that's why we say 33% greens, 66% browns. So you're not friggin' a slave to the pile. Because if you
Okay.
use all greens, you're going to be
Okay.
out there turning and watering all the friggin' time.
Wow, thank you. Okay, cool.
No, these are important conversations to have, and I love the fact that the chat is so deeply involved in these understandings. Because, look, I'm not perfect. I'm a human, and sometimes I have to look back at something and reevaluate or reassess something that I learned years ago that I've forgotten because of all the new shit I'm learning. But yeah, so better understand that nitrogen in an organic form, the only way to volatilize it is through heat. Whether you're
Okay, so
burning,
I thought that no matter what, if you just mixed fresh greens together, you were losing that nitrogen. So
nope,
I'm
it's
really
only
happy to know that it's all about temperature.
yeah, it's all through heat. The
Okay,
heating
cool.
is what volatilizes.
Cool.
All right, so back to where we were. So if you want to grow, you want to pop clones into this compost, you got to get your saturated paste closer. So you need to add some form of calcium and you need to add some form of magnesium high enough that you're going to push potassium ratio down by
Okay.
half. All right.
Because I'm surprised that it's so low in magnesium because my soil tends to be high in magnesium. I've actually tried to get my magnesium lower.
And that's in your soil, though, not in your compost.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And what's happening is you're trying to knock down the magnesium, but the plants are ripping it out of the soil, right? They're
But
chewing
if
it up.
they're ripping it out of the soil, I thought it would have shown in the compost test that the compost would have been higher in magnesium. No.
The plant's only going to take the magnesium it needs
Okay.
and leave the rest in place because otherwise
Right.
it's going to get out of balance, right?
Yeah.
So the reason why the magnesium is low in the compost and high in the soil is because of metabolism. So that metabolism has taken that magnesium, used it in plant processes, photosynthesis to expand the buds.
Okay.
So it's lost. It's turned into a secondary or tertiary metabolite, kind of like a peptide that the plant then uses up. So it's gone. It's removed. So the reason, if you are high in magnesium in your soil, then next time you go to reamend, do not use any magnesium. Start
Of
to not.
course. Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't been amending, I think, ever magnesium yet.
So there's often magnesium does come in other forms, in like
There you go. Yeah.
right, like in your clay, in stone dust, or any of those things that you could be amending or could be present. Like
Mhm.
when you made those beds, there could have been that the soil itself could have been high in magnesium.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
again, like the goal is to try to get these things to the sweet spot
Yeah.
because chemistry is the only limiting factor to biology. And biology is the only limiting factor to plant potential.
Hmm.
So if you get chemistry as close as you can, Your biology will do the work for you, and let the plant express everything that genetics potential could be,
Yeah.
because they're all working together. Because, dude, man, I read this article finally, all interdisciplinary science that have been looking at what plants know and what they actually are indicate clearly they are beyond sentient beings. They are fucking smarter than us. Like, every single cell has the oratory cells that we have in our eyeballs in the plant. So they in other words, that whole plant is a giant eyeball. I mean, dude, I'll send you the article that was
Please
really,
do.
yeah, that we in the entrenched in the industry, especially when you start to talk about, advanced plant life that's trying to help us, like cannabis, right? Cannabis is here to support endocannabinoid health in most of the animals and organisms on this planet. So of course it wants to produce the best it can, because it understands that it's here to support other life, unlike us who tend to look at it the other way.
Yeah.
They're here to support us, and this
You
I
might
love.
be a little narcissistic.
Yeah, just a little bit, just a little bit. I love to believe that the plants are actually growing us, so that we decompose and give them more minerals and nutrients.
Yeah.
Because, hey, let's face it, everything man builds goes back to fucking nature within a few years as soon as we turn our back on it, right?
Yeah.
The
Totally.
fucking roadways just start growing grasses in the middle of fucking the
Yeah.
highway. No one's driving on.
Yeah.
So all of it goes back to the plants, man.
Yeah.
But all right, I got way the fuck off topic there, so I apologize. But let's go back to this this test now. So scroll back up a little bit. So we're through the top component, the potassium, magnesium, etc., and understanding that some of these minerals become like potassium does come K2O, so that's an extra oxygen molecule. This gets a little tricky because when it's in an oxidative state, it is less available and therefore not to be considered as part of the overall formula for your for your calcium, magnesium, potassium. So I would only look at the K number for that. All right. Sodium. Sodium's fine. It's not a real issue here at all. Your sulfur looks good because that's typically, we tend to see a lot more sulfur in, especially in what I want to call cultivated plants, because sulfur is used as a pesticide as well as a fertilizer, and often when you're dealing with clay or high colloid soils, you need a little bit more sulfur to kind of like expand those clay particles so that you can begin to create aggregates. So again, the sulfur number looks fantastic. Glad to see you have boron in there. That's fantastic. Iron's another one that's totally disrespected. I mean, iron in your water is kind of a bummer because it makes everything turn orange. But iron is an essential nutrient for plants, and again, very valuable when you start talking about cell strength. Calcium and iron are your two favorite things, your favorite go-tos for plant rigidity and strength, and are willing to uh, stress prevention. Right, those are really good elements for stress prevention. Manganese is another good one. You got nice numbers there. Copper and zinc are fine. pH a little high, but that's all right. C/N ratio, all right. That's less than 16. It would be considered extremely mature.
Okay.
Now let's scroll back up to carbon. All right. So carbon's another one that does not get enough respect. And I'm going to be fucking blunt as hell here. This whole climate change, climate crisis, CO2, that is a big fucking lie. It's a fucking lie. Like, the more carbon we have in the air, the more abundant the plants are going to be, the more animals are going to be able to support themselves due to the fact that there's more plants, right? Um, Carbon is one of the things that needs to be looked at as a fertilizer. So in all the work I've been doing in the last couple of years, it's constantly getting barraged, whether it's somebody I'm working with around ecosphere sciences or, any of these alternative, biologicals, whether they're bugs in a jug or somebody's compost extract. The first question is always, well, what's the MPK? And it's the hardest thing in the world to try to explain to someone, look, NPK is a lie. That was something that the chemical fertilizer companies used to sell you the fact that this was going to be, living with chemistry or whatever that term was. It's taking your eye off the ball to the fact that no, NPK is not the answer. It's part of the answer, but it's not even close to the whole answer. And so basically, Craig and I have been struggling to create a new language, a new model, so that when you do run into someone who goes, "Oh, what's the NPK?" All right, look, I don't want to call you sophomoric or be judgmental of you. I mean, look, you're actually you're looking into chemistry, you're exploring chemistry, you're trying to understand, what my plants need to be healthy, and you've been programmed or taught or led to believe that the NPK has a solid value to it, or the most important value to it. When in reality, it's the carbon that's critical. So when I start to talk to someone who just asks me, "Oh, what's the NPK?" First thing I do is say, "Hey, NPK is great, but you ever heard of CNPK?" And the answer is like, "Well, no. What is CNPK?" Like, "Oh, well, that's carbon. That's carbon, also an extremely valuable nutrient in the soil because it feeds the biology. It feeds the soil structure, right? So your NPK, if it's sprayed on a soil that's compacted, is just going to run off. It's going to end up in the stream. But if you have aggregated soil, and that means levels of carbon that are pretty significant, that biology is going to consume that NPK and store it in their body. So carbon is probably more important than NPK because now you can penetrate your NPK because you have that carbon. Well, how do I get carbon? Well, it's easy. You just keep plants on the ground. Never let the soil go bare. Nature, other than a desert, does not let soil go bare. All right, maybe underneath, Antarctica, North Pole. Sure, that's frost, frozen. A little different situation. But bottom line, you start to open people's minds to carbon as an important ingredient to look at before NPK. And that's why we call it CNPK, because the higher the carbon, the more valuable the NPK is. Now I've got your minds open, and everybody understands that plants breathe in CO2 and release oxygen. So it's easy, right? So now all of a sudden they understand the CO2 value, and now you've opened their eyes to the fact that carbon is a critical component of the soil. And because of all of this, climate, global warming, climate change, see, we're gonna start harvesting CO2 out of the air, putting it down in deep wells underneath the earth, and we're gonna save the planet by scrubbing CO2. All right, total greenwashing, total bullshit, ridiculous. All right, but because of that awareness, when you say, "Hey, CNPK," they're kind of like putting a couple different pieces together. They don't get the picture, but at least they got like the corner of the puzzle, and maybe a corner plus a couple little more pieces. So they're starting to see, the cornerstone of real soil health is carbon, right? So then the final phase is, okay, you understand CNPK now, and they're like, yeah, that makes sense. It makes common sense, right? Okay, now I want you to think about C pre-NPK plus biology. So think about that pre-NPK. No, what do you mean by pre-NPK? Before anybody ever used NPK in the soil, what was going on, right? What you had carbon and you had biology, and you obviously had chemistry because the chemistry is in the soil or in the friggin' organic matter. So now all of a sudden people go, oh, you're right. Before 1880 or 50, whatever it was, when they first figured out that NPK had a value and it wasn't present, we used other sources. So, like manures, or like green mulching, or like composting. Those were the nutrition that we needed to grow our crops. And oh, by the way, those crops are nutrient dense and rich and full of vitamins and minerals and the things that we as the consumer need. So now I've turned this person who was asking me, oh, what's the NPK, into someone who's like, oh, I got a couple corners of the piece of the puzzle. Maybe I ought to look into this a little bit more to better understand, what that relationship is between carbon and biology, and not just focus on the NPK. And it's actually working, dude. It's like you can start to see the fucking light bulbs going off in these people's minds who, before that brief conversation, were solely focused on NPK as the only value to measure fertility. So that's why when we looked at your carbon number, I was very happy, because you do have a large volume of available carbon that can be consumed by the bacteria, to build more biofilms and to divide more and build more soil structure. So
So
again,
how would I have a bad carbon value when I'm making compost? Is it because I would add, let's say, too many wood chips, or like I'm not adding enough plant
so
fresh
so the
plant?
yeah, so the only way that you would have a decreased carbon level would be if you used 100% greens,
Okay.
because that's all nitrogen. Your
Okay, so
browns are more.
I'm getting a good carbon value because I'm using enough browns.
You're using enough browns. Exactly
Okay,
correct.
cool.
Exactly. So
Probably a part of that life that I'm getting in that compost is I should mention my wood chips and my dry stems. I put them on the property in the forest for a couple months before I use it.
nice.
So I take up a bunch of IMOs, I'm hoping anyway, and then that's what I'm using my compost with. That's what I'm using to make my compost. So yeah, it's been exposed to the elements, rain,
Yep.
maybe some snow, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, you're getting high levels of saprophytic fungi. That saprophytic fungi is breaking down that plant matter, stealing the lignins and the polymers and some of the other stuff, and
Yeah.
leaving carbon behind.
hmm I noticed that when I begin my compost, so I do that whole mix. Um, I'm not sure, maybe a week or so in, after flipping a bunch of times, there's an explosion of mushrooms.
Yeah.
Um, and then after that, though, when I let it age, nothing. Why would that be? Why
So
aren't they sticking around?
when you disturb it, you make the mushroom, the hyphae, think, oh fuck, it's the end of the world. I gotta breed. I gotta leave some. I need to leave some, offspring behind. So anytime you get a disturbance, um,
Yeah.
the fungi are going to freak out and start to try to sexually multiply, by sending off their spores to the surrounding area.
But if I'm not touching a compost for, let's say, a year, like in this case, in this compost, wouldn't I see mushrooms come out because I'm not disturbing it?
No, the mushrooms will only come out at the exact right moment. Like like mushroom hunters know at certain times of the year that this mushroom is going to technically be fruiting based on the weather patterns.
Right. So this
Right.
particular mushroom, I'm seeing maybe the perfect environment for it is for some reason a week in making this compost.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
would probably, let me ask you, are they like little tiny brown mushrooms with a, they're called inky caps, slang term.
No, they're really long, like really surprisingly long.
So do they,
Maybe like 6, 8 inches long there.
are they whitish,
Yeah.
yellowish? So
They're white. Yeah.
they almost look like penises.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Those are decomposers. That's a really good sign.
Okay.
Um,
Cool.
yeah, they're way better than the little inky caps that you generally
Okay.
see in compost making.
They're
So
probably coming from
the
that
forest.
brown stuff that I let sit in the forest.
Yeah. That's
Wood chips
you're
and stuff. Yeah.
providing. Yeah, you're providing them a feedstock that they really enjoy, and it's definitely a combination of the chips and moisture that are getting them to come out.
Yeah. I don't
And
know if it would be interesting, but we've looked at this chemistry report for the compost. I actually did a heavy metals report for this
okay,
compost too. And you're seeing the molybdenum and all that stuff. Would that be interesting to look at, or
say that
what do you?
again.
So when we're looking at this chemistry report that we looked at for the compost,
Yep.
that's for my soil. We can totally look at that. I actually tested heavy metals for the compost. Also, it's another test. I don't know if it'd be interesting to you. I was really surprised that my molybdenum levels were quite high. I think I was maybe at like 2 or 3 ppms in the compost.
Okay.
The only thing that was slightly concerning for me, and I was wondering the reason why, was I'm really concerned about cadmium, arsenic, lead, and mercury, because
Yep.
that's what I have to test for.
Yep.
And if I remember correctly, my arsenic and my cadmium were about at 0.3 ppms. So if I have that in my actual bud, that's considered high. So I'm wondering, it might be the wood chips that would have high arsenic and cadmium, or would you say it's a possibility that parts of the plants that aren't bud maybe are higher in heavy metals than the actual bud? I don't know.
So you tested your buds. You passed, right? You didn't fail.
Well, and we can have this quick conversation about Canadian regulations. Long story short is you have to set your own thresholds in Canada, and you have to explain to them and justify them, and you have to base your thresholds on pharmacopoeia standards. So let's say you go and you look at European pharmacopoeia. Well, it tells you, okay, so for a pharmaceutical inhalable, you're allowed to have 0.3 ppms of cadmium based on a 10 gram per day consumption level. So you can see how that can be left to interpretation what the threshold is. If you're just smoking a gram a day, you can handle 10 times that 0.3 ppm
Correct.
and still be at that pharmaceutical level. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So long story short, I'm always trying to keep my heavy metals down as much as possible, but luckily there's no like clear pass or fail in Canada.
All right. So cadmium is present in our atmosphere at rates way higher than it used to be probably
Okay.
20 years ago.
Really?
Yeah. So I believe cadmium, that's where you're picking up the cadmium. The arsenic is a different ballgame. Arsenic generally is used as a pesticide, but it's often found in very small quantities in wastewater. Now, you're on a well, correct?
I'm on a well and I test my water and I have no heavy metals.
Perfect. All right. So
Yeah.
that's not the source of your arsenic.
Well, would you even say that that's high? Like, let's say I apply something on my soil and I test it for heavy metals, 0.3 ppms of arsenic, let's say, is very okay.
Yep.
Wouldn't you say so? Like, let's say you test an amendment and it has 0.3 ppms, you're safe.
I would agree. Yeah. So, and
Yeah.
you're gonna see much higher levels of that in like soy meals, and some of the other
Yeah,
nitrogen.
matter of fact, pretty much anything you use to grow, if it like it's hard to find anything that just has 0.3 ppms of arsenic or
I know.
cadmium.
It's amazing.
But I would have thought that my compost would have been very like non-detectable because my levels are so low. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, and the levels we're talking about are in the bud or in the soil?
In the soil, not in the soil, in the compost.
In the compost, but not in the plant.
No, but I'll be honest with you, like they're a little higher, and that's something big that I've been working on is figuring out how to get those metals as low as possible. It's just for me personally, I want that. And what I've noticed is in the rooms that I still have pots, I'm switching to beds very soon. I'm ready for it. I custom made some rolling benches and everything. I'm ready for it. But anyway, if I'm just growing in a super soil, heavy metals are very consistent. So let's say I'm testing low with a cultivar, like any cultivar would test low. In the horizontal beds right now, I'm running a lot of test cultivars. So I have like, let's say a main cultivar that I'm doing the whole grow with, but I'll have a little section where I'm running different cultivars just to see how they perform. And I actually test them for heavy metals just to see what's up. And in the horizontal beds, I'm noticing great variations in metal uptake. Some cultivars will be very low, and some cultivars will be uncomfortably high. For example, if we talk about cadmium, since you look at pharmacopoeia standards, and they'll say 0.3 ppms is allowed on a 10 gram per day limit. A lot of companies won't look further than that and just set their limit at 0.3. And I've seen some cultivars that were exceeding a little bit that 0.3 in the horizontal beds, and other cultivars that would have next to no cadmium. So it seems to be that's honestly one of the only curveballs that I'm getting from the horizontal beds is figuring out that it's kind of a non-issue, but for me it is.
So I think the good news is that you have high molybdenum, because molybdenum is a really important cofactor in all kinds of plant
Yeah,
processes.
and you've taught me that.
Yeah.
And my molybdenum is actually really low in my soil still. So I've been going really slow at it, but I've been trying to amend the soil with molybdenum. And I get my soil reports back, and it's always still low. It's still low, but I was really surprised to see like a big 2 ppms in my metals report of my compost made with cannabis, right?
Yep.
So
Because
it could be again from the wood, maybe,
well, no, the plant took it up, right? The plant.
right? And that's the other factor, yeah.
So that's why you're continuously amending the beds, because the plants are pulling it up.
True up, yeah, yeah.
All right, and molybdenum again doesn't need to be high values. 5, 4, 3, 2 parts per million is safe. It's just when you get to less than 2 point, that
Yeah.
you're really kind of got to get nervous and get aggressive.
Yeah.
But
do you think that, like, do trees pull up metals, and that low, like 0.3 ppms of arsenic, 0.3 ppms of cadmium. And I'm just saying those numbers, it was around those numbers in the compost. Could that come from the wood chips? I could check and just test the wood chips.
I mean, it can't hurt to try to find the source of it. I mean,
Yeah.
I highly encourage you to, as always, test all the components that are coming in and try to factor that in. Now, are all trees accumulators or dynamic accumulators? No. There are plants that are dynamic accumulators, hemp, cannabis, comfrey. There's a whole bunch of them. So is it possible that they are coming in the chips? Absolutely. Is that the end all be all? No, I don't believe so. And again, there's these biogeochemical reactions and interactions that basically free up some of these things that could be bound in along with other forms of minerals or metals, so that they're not prevalent. But once they degrade and become more available, that's when it's an issue. Some of the cutting edge work we're doing right now is in understanding of bioavailable versus non-bioavailable. All right, so we all know lead is horrible for the human body. It fucks up the brain. It basically retards our ability to learn. It does all kinds of horrible things. But that being said, lead has been present since the dawn of time, and people have lived in environments that do have, if you tested the soil, very, very high levels of lead. But for whatever reason, those people aren't absorbing it. It's not affecting them. And the reason
I've noticed that you could have much higher lead levels in your soil than, say, arsenic, and cannabis isn't going to take it up. So usually, for me anyway, lead and mercury are non-issues. I mean, I don't have high lead or mercury levels per se in my soil, but when I test, I'd say they're usually higher than what I would be comfortable with arsenic and cadmium. Yet it's a total non-issue. Cannabis just seems to want to accumulate arsenic and cadmium a lot more.
I would say that as you've learned, there are cultivars that are more interested in it than others.
Right. But I've tested a lot of cultivars, and none seem to want to uptake lead and arsenic and mercury.
They're not beneficial. They don't have any real plant value. And lead is very, very high on the periodic table. So therefore, its atomic weight is really, really heavy. So difficult for plants to take up.
So you said once that if there's arsenic, let's say, in the soil, the plant takes it up, the plant decomposes, and the arsenic chemically changes to something else, and then that decomposed arsenic becomes a non-issue. So when I'm seeing my compost hit that 0.3 ppms of arsenic, is that an arsenic that, I don't know, shouldn't be there? Or is it an arsenic that wouldn't be taken up as arsenic again by another plant? Like, what's the deal with that?
So again, the biogeochemical processes that make things bioavailable or non-bioavailable are super complex, very not very well understood, and basically, we're just scratching the surface of understanding what makes it bioavailable and what doesn't. And it's not like it's a specific bacteria. It's more of an environmental condition. In other words, all these things have to come together, both the biology, the chemistry, the moisture level, heat, cold, whatever, to actually make it something that a bacteria or an animal or human could uptake that would penetrate cells. If you ate lead that was non-bioavailable, you're just going to pass it. It's the same. It's the same thing as horses. All right, horses. When you play with horse shit, you will find inevitably a tremendous amount of heavy metals, specifically aluminum. The reason why is because the feed companies are crooks. They sell you the feed based on the pounds. So they add in these minerals to increase the weight of the feed so that they can make more money. And when you test a lot of these manures, specifically with like horses, you'll see that friggin' aluminum levels are through the friggin' roof in the manure. And that's because that animal cannot digest that aluminum. It's not bioavailable. So it's just going to pass right through his system. Now, cannabis is a dynamic accumulator. So it can pull up these things and either use them in some of the more intricate plant processes. And if they do that, then they are going to convert that into a secondary or tertiary metabolite, which is non-readable. It's non-detectable. So in some cases, they probably are pulling up more than they need, just in case they need it for some other part of the plant or the plant reaction.
So that's why it could still be there
Yes.
after it's decomposed.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
you've said on another podcast that, like, let's say you're trying to clean a field and you're growing hemp, you would go ahead and just chop and drop. Are you still standing behind that statement?
Yes, eventually
there could be some still in the plant if those processes didn't fully happen, right?
but you've removed some of it.
Okay. But if you wanted to go more heavy on that cleaning, maybe it'd be better not to chop and drop.
I would take into consideration, that you have to apply common sense to all these practices. Like it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Like if your numbers are out of the off the charts, then maybe it's better to take that hemp and turn it into hempcrete or something that can be used without causing further contamination. But eventually, those metals, like everything else, will break back down or become bio-unavailable and therefore less of an issue. And again, like maybe hemp plant isn't the best plant for removing arsenic or cadmium. Maybe
I'd be curious too if I don't know if you have any idea, like maybe stems and leaves accumulate more metals than actual bud. You know,
I would do the testing on that. I mean,
because again, I'm surprised that like my flower doesn't test 0.3 arsenic. So why would I have around 0.3 arsenic in the compost that cannabis created? You know what I mean?
Again, so the plant processes, maybe it needs it more in vegetative than in flower. Right? There's one potential thing, but I think I think the important thing is to understand that any metal is going to be way more valuable in structure, in vegetative growth, than in flowering. Flowering is the genetic or the sexual reproduction of the plant itself. So probably less necessary. I mean, it doesn't need the same foods that it needs in vegetate as it does in flower. We know that. And there was another fucking point I meant to point out. In better understanding these intricate plant responses and reactions, but kind of went in one ear and gained speed.
And I'm just asking, it's kind of a non-issue because we're talking about 0.3 ppms. Let's say I'd go wildcraft some sand, silt, and clay, and you get your results back, and never mind 0.3 ppms, it has 2 ppms. Like, that's awesome. Wouldn't you say? Like, it's very low heavy metals.
Yeah.
So I'm not really scared of using this compost again at all. I'm just trying to figure things out.
And again, we're all trying to figure shit out. I mean, again, these interactions are so complex. We don't know what turns shit on and off, what makes it bioavailable, what doesn't make it bioavailable.
A lot of guys talk about soil pH and soil pH being a big factor in heavy metal uptake, particularly low pH. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. If you look at the pH chart on all minerals, there's always the sweet spot. But if you get below 6 or 7, then where
Yeah.
certain things are released, and there are some metals in at the other end, the alkaline level.
Yeah. So that's a big thing going on in my horizontal beds is my A horizon, my sandstone clay. I wanted to discuss that. Started off at 5.2 pH.
Mhm.
And since I was always using super soils before, they tended to just be around 6.5, 6.7. It was a non-issue that I wasn't thinking of. So I didn't really think about um, my pH when it came to that A horizon. I was thinking everything about sand, silt, and clay ratios and my organic matter percentage, etc. So would I be decreasing heavy metal uptake if I did something about that low pH that is now actually up to 5.5, 5.6 after a year compared to 5.2? Would you take action and try to raise that pH from that A horizon?
It looks like you're at 6.6.
Yes, but that's my O.
Okay, and the A is still down in the high fives.
Yeah, it's like 5.5, 5.6 right now.
Well,
Yeah.
again, one like 0.1 versus 0.2 is logarithmically 10 times more than 0.1.
Right.
So
Yeah.
anytime you're seeing a significant jump like that, going from 0.1 to 0.5, 0.6, you're absolutely headed in the right direction in the course of a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
But
would say,
that being said, I've been testing it. So what I've been doing is digging holes into my A horizon after crops, and I have a blue pen soil pH meter.
yep.
And I've been verifying Logan Lab pH results to my results to see if we were saying the
Yep.
same thing, and we are.
Good.
So after still a few crops, it's stuck at 5.5. So I'm kind of thinking about taking action on it because I want the lowest heavy metals possible. So you think that raising pH is a good idea, and that's what I thought. If my goal is to discourage metal uptake, right?
All right. So that's a freaking great question. I mean, I get that a lot too because I'm doing a project right now where I produced a fuck ton of yards of a horizon for a client,
Okay, cool.
and in order to get my saturated paste to where I wanted it, which was between 70 and 75 on the calcium, 15 to 20 on the mag, and then 5 to 10 on the potassium. I ended up using a little bit of gypsum and some calcium and some lanodite, spent lanodite fines. And the pH went up to, I think it was like 8. And the client kind of panicked and was like, oh my God, these plants like lower pH. They want to be down in the 6s. And I'm like, all right, look, I understand your fear of this pH, but that fear is based on soil chemistry. In other words, NPK, synthetic nutrients. When you're
Just
dealing
plugging
with,
in my computer.
yeah. When you're dealing with biology buffers pH because if the plant feeds an exudate to support a specific bacteria, and that bacteria is to mine a specific nutrient that's only available in a low and an acid or a high and an alkaline, they're going to change the pH around them so that they can mine the
Yeah.
specific nutrient. So pH is not something that I'm generally scared about, especially in a very rich biological system. But if you wanted to see if you could minimize uptake because the the matrix itself is in a more acid form, it can't hurt to change the pH. But I only fear that when one plays with pH, it's often so easy to start yo-yoing, where all of a sudden it goes fucking too high, then it goes too low, then it goes too high, because the biology is trying to fucking figure out. All right, well, wait a minute, you just fucked me all up. I just got everything where I needed it to mine this nutrient because Mama Plant asked me for it.
Yeah.
Now you've
correct me if I'm wrong, but if you have a really well balanced chemistry in your soil pH should be around where you want it. So like for cannabis, we're talking probably about 6.6, 6.7, where I'm at in my Horizon, right? So I'm kind of thinking that if I keep top watering, which I'm doing a lot more now, I used to bottom water and I still do. But I top water a lot more now that I'm more comfortable with aerometers. So I'm thinking that those minerals in my Horizon that sort of cause that pH that I'm looking for will over time go down in that Horizon, maybe, and up the pH.
So what you're talking about is organic acids, right? Uh, Citric acid. That's an organic acid, right? And we know that is low pH. So the higher the biology, the higher the saprophytic fungi, which are releasing organic acids to break down certain things. Then yes, over time, that pH is going to generally migrate more toward neutral. But it's going to take time. But in the meantime, as long as you maintain that high level of biology, it's going to balance out what it needs. Now, can the biology prevent heavy metal uptake in an acid soil? That's a great fucking question. Not something that I can answer, and something that definitely should be looked into, especially in your situation.
And you know what I should do? I should get Andy Marsh from Rhizo LCC to do a biology analysis on my Horizon.
I think that would
be a good idea.
I think
see what's going on down there.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great.
Okay. Because what I was thinking is I'd like to try this, and I wanted to run it by you, is what if I did a compost extract with my compost, and since my beds are sitting on rolling benches, and on that rolling benches I have a plastic tray that goes the whole length of the bed, I can flood that tray. What if I flood it with a compost extract and let it wick up and go straight into that Horizon with that compost being such an elevated pH like we've seen? I'm in the 8s.
So no, I would not recommend that, because what's going to happen is that the turbidity, so by that means the darkness of the water, what those indicates is super fine silt particles. So if you bottom water them, you're going to prevent the sand from acting like a filter.
Okay, you don't, and that was my main concern, is having organic matter go into that bottom horizon, the Horizon, right?
Yep. And if you top water it in, especially if you pre-water, make sure that the soil is hydrophilic, so not like thirsty.
It's going to go down.
It's going to go right the fuck down to the A. And then it's going to get trapped in the A and or the union of the E and the A.
Yeah. By the way, it's really beautiful following the aerometers, and I have the aerometer SR in my Horizon, and I have the
LT.
The aerometer. It's another one that's made for organic matter, more super soils. LT, low tension. And you're really seeing, like, let's say I really soak my beds and then I stop. You really see that Horizon getting drier, but the Horizon not. So it's really efficiently wicking up, just so we're like you said it would. And just following those aerometers, you really see that it truly works. And I just want to throw it out there. It's watering wise, the aerometers really prove it.
Yeah.
One thing I find interesting, and I don't know your thoughts on this, is I've been noticing that my reading on the aerometer SR that is in my A Horizon versus the low tension that is in my O Horizon is very similar. And I would have thought that in a sand, silt, and clay condition, even if I would have had the same moisture content or same amount of water, I would have had a different reading, because when I'm reading on what readings you're trying to shoot for based on what Aerometer actually publishes, is it greatly changes if you have a lot of silt, for example, or if it's more dominant in clay, or if it's a sandy loam, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm surprised that it's so comparable, the reading I'm getting from a sand, silt, clay organic matter than just an organic matter.
So
Would you say
that's
normal?
That's the calibration. Those instruments are calibrated to read based on the low tension or the high tension or regular tension.
Right.
So in other words, your LT is going to be way more sensitive to moisture than your RT, regular, or whatever SR.
Yeah.
Same,
I don't know what a sand was for, but
yeah, I don't either. But bottom line is that the beauty of that company was they figure out how to engineer it for different tension soils.
yeah.
And so the reading should be pretty similar, because it's designed to tell you, okay, in a low tension soil, you should be at this many millibars. At a regular tension soil, you should be at this amount of millibars.
Yeah. But what my brain doesn't fully understand is when you're getting into, let's say, regular tension soils, there's many differences, from going from a sandy loam or a clay or whatever, and you would use the same aerometer, right?
Yeah, but they give you different readings. Remember, when you're in a more silty soil, they tell you, oh, this is your reading.
Exactly.
So they
But
give
I'm just surprised that it just happens that, like, somehow I'm right bang on the exact sand, silt, and clay ratio, that when everything's perfect, it actually gives me the same reading as my low tension layer.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
I know it's counterintuitive, but in reality, because of the blend, right? You are 30% of that blend is clay and silt, and those guys are kind of your variables. Sand doesn't absorb moisture; it creates drainage. Clay expands with moisture. Silt expands with moisture. So therefore, they're more like sponges. The silt's more spongy than the clay is, and we're talking fractions here, tiny little bits. But when you have so much of it, that changes. That makes a big difference. It's kind of like, I wish I had that. I did a presentation in Vegas a couple months ago, and I wish I had it. Hopefully, I'll get it someday, and I'll put it up, because it's basically, I broke down soil engineering 101. I took the time to explain the difference between clay, sand, and silt, and the variables within the variables. In other words, there's many different types of clay. There's different colors of clay, and the different colors indicate different mineral values.
Mm-hmm.
Silt's another one that basically, it is almost the last phase of decomposition. In other words, there's only specialized bacteria that can break it down even more, and their metabolisms are so slow that it takes a lot longer for that to end up back into what we want to call a living form. So back into a nutrient that has been uptaken by a bacteria, which has been consumed by a protozoa, which has been released in the rhizosphere for the plant to take back up.
Okay.
A great example of that is swamps. or river edges where a couple rivers come together and there's an eddy. And if you step in that mud and it pull your foot out, you're like, holy shit, that stuff stinks, because it's completely anaerobic. The silt itself has gone hydrophilic, so it's completely packed with water. And so there's very little free or available oxygen in it. And because the silt particles are so small that they stack together like tiny little BBs, again, not leaving very much room for oxygen infiltration. And because they're anaerobic, they're not going to have a lot of what we call soil distribution or gas exchange, or allow organisms to come in there and shake it up. One of the coolest things that I've ever seen is a gentleman that took the time to create troughs of a freshwater aquaculture system, not aquaculture, but living like a pond. And like the Winogradsky column indicates, that the deeper down you go into the silt in the bottom of the pond, the organisms completely change. Their metabolisms completely change. They slow way the hell down, and you don't even get, like the only thing that you'll get is, perhaps freshwater mussels, but they'll only go down certain depth, right? They still stay close to the surface. But what gets really fucking interesting is, say where that top of that freshwater clam is, there's like 4 more troughs right above it. Each trough changes very slightly, but the organisms within those troughs change pretty dramatically from the bottom one to the top one. And what they're doing is they're agitating, they're breaking up that silt, making it, part of the water column so it can move downstream or be consumed by other organisms. So again, these like microclimates or microtrophs in the case of aquatic systems, you have these like incredibly different, diverse environments. So when we start talking about biomimicry and how best to produce the most fertile environment for what we're trying to grow, whether it be cannabis, strawberries, or palm trees, it doesn't matter. Those factors need to be taken into consideration, because what we're doing is building the foundation, or the foundation of the future of what that soil is actually going to transfer or move into. So that was a long-winded way of trying to say that there's a lot more to individual sand, silt, and clay components than we have time to talk about in weeks. Like just sand, right? There's calcitic sand. Basically, it was old coral reefs that wash up on those shores. Then we have high silica sand, which is basically quartz sand or rock dust. So there's a lot to all of these things, and not to just say, oh, well, sand is sand. No, it's not.
Yeah. So right now I'm actually in the process of sourcing my soil for my next room that I'm converting to horizontal beds. And I'm looking at options for sand, silt, and clay. But a big question I had for you is actually the organic matter percentage. You say go with 20, right? So here's what happened when I did my last sand, silt, and clay organic matter mix. So I sent it to the lab, to Logan Labs, and did a Malic 3 and a saturated paste on the sand, silt, and clay only, without adding organic matter. And when I did the jar test, by the way, shook the jar in water, let it sit for a few weeks. I was seeing my sand, silt, and clay layers, and on top, the organic matter. Very little organic matter, so I knew I had to add a lot. The saturated paste or the Malic 3, I'm not sure, actually specifies organic matter percentage. And without adding any organic matter, I got 2%. Okay, so very low. So what I did is I took 4 buckets of my sand, silt, and clay and mixed it with 1 bucket super soil, right? So I really had that 20% going on, like we discussed. Then I did another Malic 3 and saturated paste test on that stuff. And my organic matter was only at 4%. So I was thinking, what do you suggest when maybe that those results are just inaccurate from the lab? First of all, because for example, sometimes when I test my O Horizon, it's almost always above 20%. That's just what they said, above 20%. It came in at 14% once. And I've heard Bryant Mason, the soil doctor there, you must know him. He was at the soil summit at Green Lace facility there. I wish I could have gone. He says that's just inaccurate. Don't even bother with that number when it comes to Logan reports. So anyway, a little off subject there, but I'm just wondering, when I'm taking, let's say, 4 buckets of sand, silt, and clay, and then just 1 bucket of that very fluffy super soil, it would be a lot different if I just compacted that super soil, right? So that ratio, I could compact it and add quadruple the amount of super soil and get my 4 buckets of sand, silt, and clay, 1 bucket of super soil. So what do you think of that 4% result, first of all, from Logan Lab?
That's very typical. I mean, think about when you tested your O Horizon, which is 100% organic. And
it technically, it's about, I would say, 66 or something, because 2/3 is the fluffy organic matter and 1/3 is aeration, so pumice.
Okay, so all right, fine. It should have been 66.
Yeah,
right,
totally.
and it was only 14.
Yeah.
So basically, what I'm trying to explain to you is that Malic 3 is not a suitable test, or not the ideal test, to determine the true organic value.
Okay, good. Because I was freaked out with that 4%.
No. Look, if you're mixing 1 full bucket of organic matter, and if it's super fluffy, then I'd pack it a little bit. Like I would
just a little bit.
I would treat it like compost. Like if you have a really good compost that has a moisture value of 60-70%, it's going to be thick. It's going to be heavy, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to be just light and fluffy. So you kind of want to go along the idea of like when I make a Horizon, I'm using compost as my blend in the A. I'm not using peat moss. I'm not using core.
Well, I was going to get to that too. Like, what do you think? I could incorporate that ton of compost I have right now in that A Horizon. Boom.
And you're gonna see an increase in organic matter because the organic matter still has lignin, right?
Okay,
and
so
lignin,
you're down with that. Cool.
Yeah, lignin doesn't dissolve as easily in the acid, in the high acid. So I mean, that's the way I make my A. I mean, I tell people on the anytime talking about the A Horizon, just use your O to mix in, because it's easy, right? Because you
don't necessarily have on hand super high quality compost,
right? And again, it's difficult enough to freaking wildcraft or purchase clay and silt. Sand is easy, but to find high end mature compost is a fucking nightmare to find. It's worse than trying to find clay and silt.
Yeah. So there's a company local.
So that's why it's
topsoil, and it's actually like perfect ratios of sand, silt, and clay.
Nice.
So I'm probably going to use that. Again, I'm just freaked out with heavy metals. It has 4 ppms of arsenic. So that's the only thing I'm struggling with. Relatively speaking, it's very low, but how are plants going to react to it? We'll see.
Oh, again, I think you need to be cultivar careful. Cultivar responsible, right?
Yeah.
Until you figure it out, don't do a run of a cultivar that could potentially pull up and fail. And then again, you're a master of side-by-sides. Just
well, that's for another podcast, but I did a huge scene of like I created horizontal pots with different components. I tested all the components, and long story short, took all the notes you could imagine, grew out plants, did full heavy metal testing, and geez, man, I can't come up with actual any sense out of it. So we can discuss it another time there.
All right. So as soon as we finish today, sign up for another one. Let's bring you back on that rabbit
hole. Just an example. I wanted to see if the plants would take up metals from my sand and my rock at the bottom. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I did the same exact pot. One had the E horizon with the sand and rocks, and one had an E horizon of only perlite. Okay. And the one with only perlite picked up significantly more heavy metals than the one with actual minerals. You know what I mean? So how can that be? Like,
remember, perlite's mine.
Right, but I've used that perlite a lot in my pots, and I've never had any heavy metal uptake. So I doubt that it's polluted.
Yeah, send it out for testing. They might.
I will.
They might have run into a pocket that had another mineral exposed to it.
True that.
Listen, we got 3 questions that we should probably just try to blow through real quick, and we can continue this conversation on the next podcast.
Oh, yeah.
So
definitely,
if you'll have me again,
of course. Dude.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So our first question: doesn't the standard deviation going from high to moderate tell you that the soil is also becoming more and more uniform, so the protozoa don't hang out at just one spot, or am I reading it wrong?
So that's a great question. So the reason you change standard deviation is because you have so much material in the fucking drop that you can't see anything. So you basically take this chocolate tea, you take 1 mil of that. All right. So you start with 1 mil of soil, 9 mils of water, shake it up, put it under the microscope. If it's too cloudy and you can't see because there was just too much stuff in it, then you take 1 mil of that dilution, put it into another vial, and add another 9 mils of water. Now you're at a 10-to-1, or not, you're at 100-to-1 dilution. It could go all the way up to 500 or 1,000, depending on how much humic acid and suspended particles you have, because you can't see, you can't count the bacteria. So that's why standard deviation is necessary, or dilution is necessary, so that you can start to really see what the fuck's going on. But then based on what you see going on, you have to have a mathematical calculation to compare everything to the same. And that's where the standard deviation comes in. I hope I explained that well.
Tom, did you understand what he was talking about?
Kind of.
All right. So we have Andy Marsh coming up soon. I'll let her expand on standard deviation, just so she can make it crystal clear for the audience or whoever asked that question.
Awesome.
And actually, that would be what next week we have Andy coming on.
Nice.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Smiley's Garden had a question: is carbon the same as organic matter?
Absolutely. So
that's a good question. I kind of that's how I pictured carbon. I was like, I hope I'm right.
So carbon is a molecule on the periodic table. Organic matter is made of that molecule. So eventually that organic matter will go back to its original state as a carbon molecule.
Okay.
Cool. That's why it's so valuable, because it's easy to consume. Whereas the raw stick is going to take a lot of time to get the carbon out of. The actual carbon molecule can be absorbed very easily by a bacteria.
Awesome. It's cool to see Smiley's
I love Smiley.
watching. because I've seen him on podcasts with you, and
dude,
I'd love to meet him one day.
Tom, he's just like you, dude. Some of my best friggin' not clients, guests.
Students.
Yeah, no, guests, because you guys ask these fucking questions that are just badass and force me to really fucking go deep in thinking of like how best to answer that, because some of them are like, we're not ready to really go there yet. We just don't have the data. But anyway,
still got to get on Redox, man. We still got to get somebody on Redox.
Dude, it's that one's fucking a nightmare. But I know people that we could get on here to talk about Redox, but it's a tough one. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, it's deep, very
really
deep. So
really.
Okay, Lily wants me to dig up a comment, but here's the next question. For Tom, is there worm in the mix? Are you doing adding worms to your compost?
Actually, I've thought about it. I really want to, unless Leighton's not into it. Like, I have worms in my soil beds. I just did like kind of the same as an inoculation with the fish brew. I essentially inoculated worms, not that many. And now I notice that I have plenty. So what do you think, man? Leighton,
Well,
should I put worms in that compost pile?
I would encourage you to lay down cardboard and gather the indigenous. So if you lay down a bunch of cardboard and then put the compost on top of it, those worms will come in there in a heartbeat.
Okay, good idea.
Or avocado tech, but don't need avocados, just a squash or whatever.
Yeah, like it's not a big deal if I don't get only red wigglers, No,
I'm a big fan of.
I've discussed with you that there can be invasive worms, like if you get a bunch of night crawlers in there or something like that. You know what I mean?
I think you guys are safe. I don't think you got the crazy Asian jumping worms up there yet.
Okay.
I think they're only like in the very southern part of Canada. I don't think they can tolerate the extreme cold that you guys have.
Okay, because I actually went outside today and looked for some worms, and anyway, it's pretty freaking cool. I pulled up a piece of wood, and I thought it was a big, weird red wiggler. I pick it up; it's this big salamander. Really freaked me out, but really cool.
Nice. Put him in the compost pile.
I'm not sure. Like, he probably wouldn't like that, right?
Oh, dude, I used to get fucking salamanders. I used to get fucking little baby turtles, frogs, tree frogs, toads.
Okay. I didn't want to take him out of his environment because I picture salamander as being pretty
well, look where he's living. He's living underneath a log on top of soil, which is essentially where the composting zone is.
Right. Yeah.
Right? So he's probably thrilled. He probably started laying eggs and having babies, man.
Okay. Great. Maybe I should put some in my beds too.
Yep. So I think this was the comment that Lily put that she wanted to bring up, another type of ex-pseudo method of electrokinetic soil remediation, which uses current to remove heavy metals from the soil. Electrodes are placed in sediment and a low direct current is allowed to flow. So kind of like a redox kind of half-assed idea, I think.
Well, I would tend to think that there's definitely some merit to that, because vibration, heat, sound waves. Mm-hmm. I'm making sure that I cover both vibration and sound waves, because, and again, electricity, have shown to, like birds, they flock together. In other words, they attract their counterparts because they want to be together. They want to form a new cluster of that mineral. So I would definitely think that you could encourage metals in situ, in soil, in place, to move together, in which case it'd be easier to remove them, because now it's something you can see and not just a superfine particle that is all by itself.
Interesting. Very interesting. So guys, we're at the 2-hour mark.
I can't believe we did it.
It's
We
crazy. I could find stuff to talk about for another 2 hours. Like
exactly. But I think we got through the point of catching up with you and
totally.
Yeah,
I actually made a file that I haven't touched on my computer with a bunch of subjects to talk about, and I have a bunch of lab tests that I wanted to go over, and like a whole bunch of other stuff. So we could do another one later, and all
right, just get back with Ken, hop on the friggin' ticket, because I think we're out 5 weeks or 4 weeks now.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're up to James White, the middle of next month.
Yeah, couple weeks, couple months, whatever. I'm always like, I spend probably way too much money on lab testing, but I'm just like testing like crazy, just trying to learn. So if you give me another couple months, I'll be armed with a whole bunch more data.
Dude, you come on whenever you can, because again, your testing is helping this audience immensely. Because
they're testing everything you couldn't believe. Like I looked at my taxes and my last year bill on lab testing, and I was like, "Are you serious?"
Dude, you'd be horrified to see mine. All right, absolutely,
right. Yeah.
Horrified to see the amount of money I spend on testing versus the amount of money I get for that testing.
Right.
But yeah, we got to know. We got to understand this shit.
For sure.
And
if I didn't do that much testing, though, like, pardon me?
I was just going to say, before I get into trouble, I have to wish my wife a happy birthday for tomorrow, because it's her birthday tomorrow. So
happy birthday. Happy birthday, Lil.
All right, guys, with that, we'll end the show, and the next conversation, Tom, maybe we'll do Dennis and then Tom back to back every couple of months.
I think that's a great idea.
Awesome.
Okay, right, peace out, guys.
Thanks as always, Ken, for all your hard work in the background. Tom, thanks for your couple hours of time and all of the great questions and hard work that you're doing for all of us to gain from.
So, I loved it. Thank you for having me, guys.
All right, peace out.